I don't know what went wrong between us, but it made me angrier until I was just like, yeah, I'm done.
He just takes care of himself. He sees what he needs to do, and he just does what is right for him and what is right for Robyn. And I think that he's gonna screw Mary and Janelle completely.
It was the kind of moment you almost couldn't script, unless of course you were living in the chaotic emotional roller coaster that is Sister Wives. According to insiders and more than a few eyebrow-raising fan recaps, Kody Brown allegedly hinted, maybe not directly, but heavily enough that Christine should maintain a kind of spiritual purity even after walking away from their failed marriage.
He just always somehow thinks he's somehow entitled to more, which is just, it's astounding.
And when this suggestion reached Christine, she didn't cry, she didn't plead, she laughed. Full stop. A sharp, irreverent, almost cathartic laugh that some viewers called the most satisfying moment in the entire post-divorce era. Because what else do you do when the man who emotionally neglected you for years suddenly thinks he has the right to tell you how to live after you've left him? What's wild is that this wasn't just about feelings. It was allegedly rooted in the dusty old dogma of eternal sealing and purity laws.
I think that there, like I said, is a recency bias, and I feel like that there's rewriting of history a lot.
The implication? That Christine, as a sealed wife, still belonged to Kody in some cosmic heavenly sense. That if she dared to move on romantically, or heaven forbid physically, she'd be committing adultery against a man who hadn't even looked at her like a wife in years. And if that isn't enough to make you spit out your tea, wait until you realize this comes from the same man who snuck around to court Robyn while technically married to 3 other women. But back to Christine. Her laugh didn't come from pettiness, it came from a place of freedom. Of finally seeing the absurdity for what it was.
It feels like everything's just sort of falling apart, and I'm trying so hard to remain hopeful.
She didn't just walk away from Kody. She walked away from a belief system that told her she was bound to a man forever, even if that man didn't show up for her emotionally, financially, or spiritually. So when Kody reportedly started waxing poetic about the sacred bonds of sealing, or hinted that she'd be destroyed in the afterlife for moving on, Christine didn't flinch. She laughed. And that laugh, it echoed through the fandom like a battle cry. But little did Kody know, his suggestion would crack open a conversation about faith, control, and female autonomy that he was never prepared to face.
It feels like I'm in an alternate reality or something. Like I just don't know how to wrap my brain around what's happened.
He might have hoped that spiritual guilt would keep her tethered, but Christine had already slipped the leash. For years, she'd played the good wife, abiding by the quiet, choking rules of their fundamentalist upbringing. The Apostolic United Brethren's doctrine, especially the infamous Section 132 of the Doctrine and Covenants, was clear. Once sealed to a man, a woman's loyalty was eternal. She could leave the man in this life, sure, but she couldn't break the heavenly contract without serious spiritual consequences. The word destroyed was used more than once in those dusty scriptures. And it wasn't metaphorical. Women were told their very salvation depended on obedience, on staying loyal even if the man no longer loved them, respected them, or kept his promises. But Christine, she was done obeying.
I mean, I have a good relationship with Mary. And I still am not talking with Christine.
Fans had long suspected that these religious dynamics were playing out behind the scenes, especially after Christine and Janelle both began speaking publicly about their desire for independence. What had once been couched in spiritual terms was now being stripped bare. This wasn't faith, this was control. Christine didn't need a man to authorize her worth, let alone one who had spent most of the last decade pouting at her from behind Robyn's shoulder. So when Kody leaned on that old doctrine, allegedly suggesting she'd still be sealed to him in the afterlife, and therefore shouldn't seek anyone new, it didn't land. Not this time. Because Christine had already started telling a different story, one where salvation came not from obedience but from joy. And joy was exactly what she'd been radiating ever since she walked out that door.
Christine and I just don't talk.
In truth, that laugh of hers wasn't just about Kody's latest delusion. It was a release of decades of bottled-up submission, a crack in the foundation of a system that told women to stay small. But if Christine was cracking, Janelle was right behind her, and their quiet rebellion was only beginning to shake the walls Kody had spent years trying to reinforce. Christine didn't just leave a marriage, she staged a full-blown personal renaissance. And fans watched it unfold in real time, like a long-overdue plot twist in a series that had spent too many seasons making her the afterthought. One minute she was enduring Kody's emotional neglect with practiced politeness, the next she was posting glow-up selfies, beaming beside her new husband David Woolley, and launching her cooking show with the kind of playful sass we hadn't seen since the early days. It was as if she'd opened a window and let all the stale doctrine out with the draft. She wasn't crying over spiritual repercussions, she was out here making nachos, getting engaged, and reminding viewers what real freedom looks like. And let's be clear, it wasn't just surface-level reinvention. Christine's transformation struck a nerve because it rewrote the script entirely.
Christine coming in the family sort of diluted the relationship between Janelle and Mary.
Here was a woman who had once been told she'd be destroyed for stepping outside a heavenly bond, now out here thriving in broad daylight with a new man, new marriage, and absolutely zero shame. The quiet assumption that she would either stay single forever or creep into some kind of shadow relationship was obliterated the moment she posted those engagement photos, bright, bold, and unapologetic. And Kody, he didn't even have a poker face left. Every time her joy showed up on a screen, his irritation became more visible. His barbed comments about loyalty and commitment no longer read as concern. They read as loss of control. And maybe, deep down, even he knew it. Christine had upended the entire power dynamic, and all it took was her own laughter. But the more public her happiness became, the more fans started re-examining the moments that led up to it, including the uncomfortable suggestion that she should have stayed celibate to preserve some kind of spiritual legacy. That's when the spotlight swung back to Kody, and what he actually said. The thing is, Kody never outright said the word celibate, at least not on camera. He's too slick for that. But what he did say over and over again was loaded with implication. The passive-aggressive sighs about Christine rushing into love, the veiled comments about betrayal, the not-so-subtle jabs during tell-alls, where he hinted that she was turning her back on something sacred. And while he might have wrapped it in spiritual language, fans picked up what he was really serving: judgment. Specifically, judgment for daring to move on.
I had such a better relationship with Janelle, with Christine, with Robyn.
Christine's dating life didn't just bother him, it seemed to offend his sense of ownership. He made it crystal clear he didn't see her new relationship as real. He once even mocked it as a temporary infatuation, as if her decades of loyalty to him still counted for something after he emotionally vacated their marriage. But when it came to his own romantic history, courting Robyn behind closed doors, playing favorites while still technically married to the others, he expected understanding. It's this blatant double standard that left fans fuming, and Christine, she saw right through it. That's why her reaction was laughter. She knew what he was trying to do. By implying that she had some spiritual obligation to remain pure, he was leaning on the same outdated rules that kept so many women frozen in unhappy marriages. But Christine wasn't frozen anymore. She was free, and if Kody thought quoting old doctrines or pouting about her new romance would shake her, he was decades too late. She wasn't looking for his permission. She was living her truth, and fans were cheering her on like it was the Super Bowl. Still, that didn't stop Kody from pushing the idea that Christine was somehow doing something wrong, which made the hypocrisy all the harder to ignore, because if purity mattered so much, why didn't it apply to him? And here's where the whole thing starts to really unravel, because if Christine's happiness is inappropriate, as Kody has suggested in so many words, then what does that make his history with Robyn? Fans haven't forgotten how their courtship dragged on for nearly a year, far longer than the typical timelines embraced by the Apostolic United Brethren, where relationships were expected to move fast with minimal physical contact. It was part of the faith: no kissing, no prolonged affection, no long dating periods, especially for a man who was already married. And yet Kody and Robyn's drawn-out romance stood in sharp contrast to those so-called values. Even Janelle once hinted at it, saying she wasn't sure she would have married Kody if she'd had a whole year to get to know him. Christine, too, called their relationship inappropriate within the framework of their faith. That word carries weight, especially when it comes from someone raised in a system where inappropriate meant adulterous. Because under the doctrine, Kody himself once claimed to believe, even something as seemingly innocent as kissing before sealing was considered a serious violation. So let's get this straight. Kody, already sealed to 3 wives, allegedly carried on a year-long physically affectionate relationship with Robyn, and that's supposed to be fine. But Christine, years after walking away from him and openly rejecting that dynamic, finds love, and suddenly she's disrespecting the faith? It's the kind of double standard that makes your blood boil. He's built a world where the rules bend conveniently in his favor, where he gets to call the shots on who's holy and who's falling short. But Christine's laugh? It cracked that whole illusion wide open. It said, I see the game you're playing, and I'm not playing anymore. Because this isn't about faith, it's about power. It's about Kody trying to maintain authority over a woman who finally stopped letting him define her worth. And the deeper you look, the clearer it becomes. Purity, loyalty, obedience. Those aren't spiritual ideals in this story. They're tools of control. But Christine, she dropped them like dead weight and walked into the sunlight. And she wasn't the only one. Janelle was watching too, and what she did next would change everything. Janelle had always played things close to the vest, more practical than emotional, more grounded than dramatic, but even she couldn't keep quiet forever. In the months following Christine's breakaway, something shifted in Janelle. She started talking more openly about what she wanted in life. She hinted at the possibility of dating again, passion, of falling in love, not just spiritually, but in the real messy romantic sense. And just like that, the house of cards Kody built started fluttering, because Janelle, the steady one, the faithful one, the wife who always did what needed to be done, was no longer nodding along. She was questioning the very foundation. And the more she questioned, the more fans began to wonder, were these women still sealed to Kody in the eyes of their faith? Had any of them officially sought to remove those spiritual ties? Or were they, at least on paper, still bound to him for eternity? In the AUB tradition, being sealed isn't just a ceremony. It's a contract, a covenant, a ticket to exaltation. But breaking that seal, that's where things get tricky. Some women believe they can only be unsealed by a priesthood leader. Others have been taught that no matter what happens on earth, the sealing remains in place forever. And that belief, rooted in fear, guilt, and religious manipulation, is what Kody has allegedly used to keep control long after the marriages themselves crumbled. But now, both Christine and Janelle are living as though that spiritual rope has already been cut. They're dating, smiling, living, and not one of them is looking over their shoulder waiting for approval. That's what makes this so revolutionary. For years, these women were told their destiny was sealed, literally, that even if they walked away in this life, they'd still be tethered in the next. But Christine's laugh and Janelle's quiet rebellion sent a different message. You don't get to claim my eternity if you couldn't even show up in my reality. And just as that message was starting to ripple outward, another figure stepped forward, not with words, but with a look. A carefully placed sigh, a few choice tears. Robyn was re-entering the scene, and she wasn't happy. Robyn has always played the emotional card, whether through soft-spoken interviews, tearful confessionals, or strategic silences that spoke volumes. And lately, her tone has shifted. While she's not outright blaming Christine and Janelle, there's a growing sense, especially in recent tell-all clips and whispered statements, that she sees their departure as a spiritual unraveling, that the family's fragmentation is, at least in part, their fault for not staying loyal to the faith. Some fans believe Robyn is now operating as Kody's unofficial mouthpiece, echoing sentiments he doesn't quite have the finesse to say himself. In one particularly telling moment, she appeared to lament the loss of unity among the wives and questioned whether the family could ever be whole again. But behind that soft sorrow, some viewers picked up on something sharper, a guilt trip campaign dressed up as grief. When Robyn talks about the family falling apart, she doesn't talk about Kody's favoritism, or his spiritual hypocrisy, or his total neglect of emotional balance among the wives. No, she fixates on Christine's exit, on how hard it's been on her kids, on the sadness in her heart. And while pain is valid, the selective focus is glaring. Because let's be honest, Robyn didn't seem too concerned when Kody was skipping days with Christine to spend time at her house, or when Janelle was financially struggling while Robyn's household was expanding into luxury. Her tears now feel less like mourning and more like strategy, a way to subtly suggest that if only the women had stayed obedient, stayed sealed, everything would still be perfect, that their spiritual defiance broke the system. But fans aren't buying it. They see the manipulation. They hear the undercurrent of shame disguised as sorrow, and they're calling it out. Robyn's version of events leaves no room for growth, no acknowledgement of the deep emotional labor Christine and Janelle carried for years. Instead, it centers her pain, her image, her place beside Kody. And while she may not have said it outright, the implication is clear. Women like Christine, who choose joy over guilt, have somehow failed. But if that's failure, Christine and Janelle seem happy to wear it. And Kody? He's watching his entire narrative fall apart and starting to show cracks of his own. It's not just bitterness. Kody's whole demeanor has started to shift. What used to be smug certainty has turned into barely contained agitation. The telltale signs are all there. The defensive tone in interviews, the repeated need to remind everyone he did his best, and the increasingly hostile references to his former wives. But what fans are really picking up on is the deeper emotion behind it all: panic. Because for all his preaching about sacred bonds and family values, it's becoming harder to ignore the truth. Kody is losing control, and not just of the family dynamic, but of the narrative itself. Christine's public glow-up and Janelle's quiet rebellion have created a ripple effect that's outpacing his ability to contain it. And the more they thrive, the more his insecurities flare. Some insiders speculate that it isn't spiritual concern driving his commentary, it's ego. Kody reportedly feels embarrassed. He never expected Christine to actually leave, let alone to remarry. He thought maybe she'd fizzle out quietly, that she'd stay alone, perhaps waiting for reconciliation that would never come. But instead, she lit a match and torched the script, and every time her smiling face flashes across a screen, it reminds him she's not looking back. She's not asking for his forgiveness, his approval, or his blessing, and that, for a man used to being the center of every orbit, is devastating. What's worse, viewers have started asking the one question Kody never wanted to hear: why is he so obsessed with what Christine does now? If the spiritual contract is broken, why does it bother him so much? If she's truly out of his life, why can't he move on? Fan theories are running wild. Some say it's jealousy that Christine found genuine love first. Others think it's shame that her happiness shines a spotlight on how poorly he treated her. And a few suggest something even more cutting, that Kody's not mourning the marriage, he's mourning the power. Because once, his words shaped reality, but now, Christine laughs in his face, and the world laughs with her. That power is gone. And as his once loyal kingdom slips away, Kody's left with only his doctrine, and the unsettling realization that maybe no one's listening anymore. Christine's laugh wasn't just a personal victory, it was a cultural moment. For countless women watching, especially those who'd lived through marriages where faith and fear were weaponized, that laugh hit like thunder. It wasn't cruel or mocking, it was freeing. A sound that said, I'm done playing by the rules you wrote to keep me small. And in a broader sense, it tapped into something deeper, a quiet rebellion that's been bubbling beneath the surface for years. Women over 50, once expected to shrink into silence or fade into the background, are speaking louder than ever. They're walking away from toxic relationships, starting over in midlife, choosing happiness over obligation. And Christine? She's become an avatar for all of it. Because this wasn't just about one broken marriage, it was about a lifetime of conditioning that told her she had to endure, that her spiritual worth was measured by obedience, that once sealed, her only ticket to eternal peace was staying faithful, no matter the cost. But when she walked away and then unthinkably laughed in the face of the man who tried to shame her for it, it shook something loose. Women flooded comment sections saying they felt seen, that they too had laughed for the first time in years after leaving bad marriages, toxic churches, oppressive households. Christine's laugh wasn't just about Kody, it was about reclaiming joy. And the ripple effect is still growing. Because if Christine can do it, why not Janelle? Why not Mary? Why not every woman told she's past her prime? Too complicated, too old to start again. The story stopped being about sealing or doctrine or dusty rules from a faith most viewers had never even heard of. It became about courage, about rewriting the ending, about choosing love, even if it means walking away from the people who once swore they'd never leave you. Kody wanted Christine to stay celibate. He wanted her to feel trapped by the spiritual rules he stopped following long ago. But what he got instead was a woman who laughed in his face and then danced into the next chapter of her life with the sun on her shoulders and no guilt in her heart. And in that moment, it wasn't just Kody who lost power, it was the whole structure around him that began to crumble. And now, when fans look back on that laugh, it's clear it wasn't just about one moment, it was about everything that came before it. All the years Christine bit her tongue, all the nights she watched Kody drive away to Robyn's, all the sacrifice, the silence, the slow erosion of her joy under the weight of spiritual obligation. That laugh carried all of it, and it shattered the illusion that Kody still had any say in her story. In many ways, it was more powerful than a sermon, more defiant than a divorce. It was her way of saying, I don't owe you obedience, I owe myself peace. And that sentiment, simple as it may sound, has become revolutionary in the context of the world she came from. Because for women raised in high-demand religions, especially those with strict marriage doctrines, walking away isn't just emotional, it's existential. You're told your salvation depends on your submission, that your eternal family is at stake, that your body, your love, your future belong to the man God gave you. Christine didn't just reject that narrative, she set fire to it, and then she laughed. A real, head-tilted back, unapologetic laugh that said no more. That's why it stung Kody, that's why it rattled Robyn, and that's why it ignited something in the rest of us, because it reminded everyone watching that starting over isn't just possible, it's sacred. It's the kind of sacred that no priesthood seal can manufacture, the kind that no doctrine can destroy. And while Kody scrambles to reclaim a story that no longer bends to his will, Christine is out there writing her own chapters. Chapters filled with road trips and blended families, with sunshine and sincerity, with a kind of healing that doesn't require permission. So here's the question we're left with. Was it Christine's laughter that undid Kody, or was it the truth behind it? The truth that women can walk away, that joy doesn't have to be earned through suffering, that sometimes the most spiritual thing you can do is laugh in the face of a man who thought you never would. So tell us, do you think Kody truly believed Christine would stay single forever? And do you think Robyn is still trying to keep the other wives spiritually trapped? Be sure to like, subscribe, and stay tuned, because the next video on your screen is waiting. And trust me, you won't want to miss it.